Alright, so I have here the SJT 400. This player was my backup player, and it was having an issue where it would show please load disc at the bottom, but then the whole thing would be smeared like to the side. And I brought it to the workshop, and Austin found that there was some weak solder joints on one of the boards, and he repaired it. And so now you power it on, and please load disk. Works good. But then he was having a problem where these gears would just keep spinning. Like, it didn't realize that the stylus arm was all the way back to the home position. And so I thought maybe it was something in the stylus arm. I messed around with that for a while. I probably took this faceplate off about 20 times. And then I found out that down over here, it's going to be really hard to see. I'm going to get another light. So down here, that little white square, super hard to get to. So that little white square there is a switch, and you can see that the lever is resting against the stylus arm. And there's actually two switches there, one on top of the other. You can see the other switch underneath it sticking out the side, resting on the stylus arm. And those two switches look like this, and they are separated with this plastic piece and held on by this clear piece. So what had happened is the switch on the bottom, see how they have these little holes? The switch on the bottom had gotten knocked out of place, and so the arm wasn't triggering this little sensor, wasn't triggering this lever. The arm pushes against this lever, but since it had gotten pushed out of place, it wasn't triggering that anymore. And let me tell you what, these are a nightmare to take apart and put back together, because you have zero room. I had to take the faceplate off. I had to take this whole assembly here off just to get enough room to get in there, and then you got to slide the stylus arm all the way forward, and then you can kind of get in there, and you have to use some like forceps and some really long tweezers, and then you can get in there. And I had to have a screwdriver with a really long shaft on it in order to even get in there. You almost couldn't even get, I don't know if I can get in there, but you can see this screw here is pretty easy to get to, but there's another screw on the other side for this white plastic piece. That's the top screw, that's the bottom screw. That bottom screw, there's a metal bar that goes across here, and then there's some ground cables welded or soldered on, and the bottom screw is literally right where they soldered on those ground wires, so it's almost impossible to get it to it. You have to angle your screwdriver and just hope that you don't strip the screw out. It's really sketch. But so I took this top cover off, and then I was able to lift this top one off and lift this plate out, and then I was able to reposition this bottom one back to where it was supposed to be. And then I had to figure out how the heck this thing goes back on, because as you can see, it really only goes on one way. And then you have to position this back on top, and then you have to put this back on top and get the screws in without any of this stuff moving. It probably took me close to an hour. Definitely not an easy task. These are from a spare player, obviously, but if I can set you down a second here, I'll show you how it goes together. Come on. Let's stay like this. Okay, so this one with the gray cable is on the bottom, and if you look closely, there's words It says Japan Alps. So the words go down. The gray cable is the one that's on the bottom. So there'll be two little tabs like this. It's really hard to see on this black piece, but there's two little tabs like that built into the player. So you have to position this into those two little tabs, and then this goes with this pointy thing, this little piece that juts out, goes down into the back. And as you can see, these two little tabs, as you can see or not see, these two little tabs will go into those holes. So one goes there, and then one goes there, so that it sits flat like that. And then once that's in, then you can put this top one back on. It also goes with the word Alps, Japan and Alps, facing down. And then you just line up the holes for that one like that, so that the whole thing sits flat. And it'll be sitting flat in the player like this, and then the stylus arm comes down and triggers this one and triggers this one. And then you have to get this back on top of the whole assembly like that. And then it's got these big long screws like this that go in and all the way down. So you have to get all that lined up, and it just wants to keep popping off like that because of the wires and stuff. So you have to get all that lined up and stacked up and then screwed back down, all inside that itty bitty little area. You can kind of reach it from this side, but not really. Kind of reach it from that side, but not really. Yeah. So, if you ever have the problem where you turn the player on and instead of flashing load, it just spins, these just spin and don't register the stylus arm in the home position, that's what it is one of those little sensors. And I would pray to the CED gods that you wouldn't have to replace one of these little sensors, because I don't know how you would solder that on. I'd probably flip the player over and just cut the wire and then solder this replacement on, or just, you know, connect the wires to the old wires. That would probably be a lot easier than trying to solder this in that little tiny space. But yeah, I'll have to look up and see what these are called. They're just micro switches or something. They use the same switches to activate the rollers right there. And there's one on this side somewhere. On the back. In the back over here, there's one somewhere. Yeah, there's two of them back there for the spine sense. It senses the spine and the caddy and whatnot. But now she works just fine. Thanks for watching.